Hello everyone. This is in continuation of the series on basic concepts and terms we discussed in the last videos. In this video, we are going to discuss the following terms. Now these are very important terms. You will need to form strong foundation for macroeconomics. I'm going to do these four concepts together here because I feel they are interrelated. Now let's first discuss the first concept, which is the difference between final goods and intermediate goods. Now, what is a final good? A final good or consumer good is a final product which is ready for sale that will be used by the consumer to satisfy their current want or need. Intermediate good would be the good which will be used to produce that final good. In this example, you can see a log of wood is an intermediate good which is used to produce a chair which will be ready for the market to be bought by the consumer. Another example I can give you is maybe a microwave oven or a bicycle. These are all final goods, but the parts purchased to manufacture them will be intermediate goods. Some important facts about intermediate goods. The intermediate goods are sold industry to industry for resale or to produce other products. They are typically used directly by a producer. Then they are sold to another company who may turn it into another intermediary good or sold to another company who will turn it into a finished product. For example, the farmer produces wheat who sells it to the miller who turns it into flour. Then the flour is bought by the baker who will turn it into a bread and then finally sell it to the consumer. So you can see that there are so many producers involved in the production of bread, which is the final good needed by the customer. Another important thing we need to understand about intermediate goods is that some of the intermediate goods might lose their identity in the process of production of final good. For example, if I take shirt, the buttons on the shirt are not losing their identity. They have become a part of that shirt. But if we look at cotton, which has lost its identity when we turned it into a cloth, that's also an intermediate good. So intermediate good can be a part of the final good, or even sometimes they can lose their identity in the process of production. Third important thing we need to understand about intermediate goods are that even services can also be intermediate in some cases. For example, in the case of a photographer, the photography is an intermediate service, while the photographs are the final product. The best way to find out if the good is an intermediate or final will depend on its final use. And this distinction is very helpful when we calculate national income. Now let's take the example of a sewing machine. Sewing machine purchased by a tailor would be an intermediate good, but the same machine purchased by the household would be a final good. Another example would be if we take sugar. Now it can be used as an ingredient to produce a cake by the baker, and if it is bought by a household, they will be using it directly for their consumption. So in the case of baking a cake, this would be an intermediate good. And in the second case, in the case of sugar being bought by the household, it will be considered a final good. Similarly, another example could be electricity. Electricity used by a factory could be an intermediate good, and the electricity used by household would be final good. So end use is the principal basis to classify whether the good is an intermediate good or a final good. Now this distinction will help us to calculate national income. So the difference between final good and intermediate good is very important to understand before we understand what is national income. Now what is national income? National income measures the value of goods and services produced in a country for final users. Now, why specify for final users? The main reason is to avoid double counting. Otherwise, what will happen, let's say for the example of wheat. Now, if we are going to include the value of wheat, then again the value of flour, then again the value of cake, it means we are counting the value of wheat thrice in calculation of national income. So to avoid that double counting or triple counting, we just add the value of the cake to the calculation of national income, which is being bought by the final consumer. So, to avoid counting some goods and services more than once, we need to always identify the final use of the good. I hope this is clear. This is very, very important. Another thing we need to understand that we can only add the value of all different goods and services in an economy when we convert that into a common unit, which is money. The most widely used measure of national income is GDP, gross domestic product. Gross means total, domestic means home economy, and product refers to the output being produced in an economy. Now, there are three methods of calculating national income: the output method, the income method, the expenditure method. We will discuss this topic in detail later. Right now, just understand the definition of national income, which you will need in order to understand our next topic, which is economic growth. Now, what is economic growth? As we already discussed, that national income is the total output produced in any economy. Economic growth is defined as an increase in real national income over time. Let me tell you a story. Let's say that a special berry grows naturally only in the country of Utopia. Natives to Utopia have used this berry for many years, but recently a wealthy German traveler discovered the berry and brought samples back to Germany. His German friends also loved the berry, so the traveler funded a large berry exporting business in Utopia. The new berry exporting business hired hundreds of Utopians to farm, harvest, wash, box, and ship the berries to grocers in Germany. In one calendar year, the berry exporting business added over $1 million to Utopia's GDP because that's the total value of the goods and services produced by the new berry exporting business. Since Utopia's GDP increased, this means that Utopia experienced economic growth. Now, in the above story, we have seen that the national income of Utopia has increased, which has led to economic growth. But if this growth doesn't trickle down to other areas, get transformed into solving other economic issues of a country, then the country may be growing but not developing. What do you mean by economic development? It's a process whereby the real national income of a country increases over time along with fall in their poverty ratio, unemployment, income inequality, etc. Let's continue our story. Let us now extend the benefits of economic growth to Utopia. Before the berry exporting business, most Utopians lived in small villages, many miles from one another. Few Utopians had access to schools, fresh water, or health care. Utopian men worked long hours attempting to farm land that was naturally unsuitable for most crops, just to feed their immediate families. After the berry exporting business, many Utopians found work through the new industry. Newly employed villagers relocated closer to the business, giving them better access to schools, healthcare, and fresh water produced for the plant and surrounding areas. Most Utopian men were able to trade labor intensive hours in the fields for easier 8-hour shifts. Besides earning a salary, the new work enabled them more leisure time and contributed to their longer lifespans. Thus, Utopia experienced economic development through economic growth. This is economic development. It's a wider term. It includes economic growth. Now let's go back to the definition of economic growth because I want you to notice few important points here. Economic growth generally means an increase in real national income over time. And the definition of economic growth rate is that it's the annual percentage change in output. When we talk about over time, it means that this is over a period of time, usually a period of 1 year. What do I mean by real? You will come across two terms in economics, nominal GDP and real GDP. Nominal GDP measures the economic output of a country using current market prices, and real GDP takes inflation into account to create a more accurate measure. When we measure economic growth, we should take real GDP to get the real idea about how our economy is functioning. The price index used to convert nominal into real GDP is known as the GDP deflator. And the formula for GDP deflator is real GDP is equal to nominal GDP into price index in the base year divided by price index in the current year. You can pause the video here and go through this slide and even the last slide to understand the difference between real GDP and nominal GDP, as well as look at the example shared to understand how to apply the formula of GDP deflator. Now, this is a list of 5 fastest growing economies in the world according to Focus Economics, which are expected to grow fastest over 2022 to 2026 period. They collected the data for 198 countries, and this is the list they have come out with. Number 1 is Guyana. The average growth is expected to be 25.8%. Because of dozens of oil discoveries made in recent years, this area is supposed to grow the fastest. Then you have Macau, where average growth is expected to be 11.9%. Macau relies heavily on tourism and gambling. Then you have Fiji, Niger, Libya. These are going to be the top 5 poorest countries in the world according to the same study. All of the top 5 are from sub-Saharan Africa. This region continues to be held back by many problems: corruption, poor infrastructure, lack of human capital. Somalia has been racked by violence for decades. We also need to understand that economic growth measures can be misleading. They can give us distorted picture of the level of income in a country, especially per capita income. High economic growth fueled through capital spending can hide several problems. We may not be able to gauge that who owns larger share of wealth. It could be just concentrated in the hands of very few people. So we might feel that a country or an economy is growing, but there might be a very distorted picture of that growth in our minds. We also need to understand that there are many costs and benefits attached to economic growth. A growing economy is a rapidly changing economy. There would be change in the job structure, which might mean that workers may have to learn new skills, which might be difficult for them to cope up with. They might end working for more hours. Companies might have to face a lot of competition, or they might be under pressure to come up with new ideas. There will be more pollution in the name of progress. Natural resources will be depleted faster. Another cost could be that the economy might need to invest in capital goods for more growth, and they may not be able to meet the present consumer needs of the population. Though this would be good in the long run, but in the short run, this might become a problem. There are many benefits of economic growth. Definitely, it will lead to better employment prospects, improved standard of living. The confidence of the business investors would be optimistic, which would help in more investment. International recognition of the economy might increase, which we could see lately for India and China. So these are the benefits. Now, some economists debate whether the benefits outweigh the costs, especially in high income countries. But we also understand that in low income countries, it is seen as essential to bring people out of poverty. I hope that this video was helpful. If you like it, kindly follow, share, and subscribe. You're also most welcome to visit my website where you will find blogs written on various economic topics. Bye.